Shooting incident in Chao after police officer is attacked. The U.S. poised to send its flagship tanks to support Ukraine. Confidential documents found in former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence's home. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. There was a shooting incident on the outlying island of Chao last night. A police officer fired 3 gunshots at a Filipino man who was grabbing his neck while officers were carrying out an investigation over a noise complaint. The police stressed the open fire was necessary as the officer's life was threatened and that the man failed to listen to police warnings. According to a video provided by a Chao resident, the man who was shot was on the floor with blood rushing from his waist. The incident took place in a second-floor flat on Wing-on Street. Early this morning, police detained another Filipino man involved in the case from the flat on suspicion of obstructing and assaulting a police officer. More police reinforcements joined in the probe. A bullet and an item of clothing believed to belong to one of the suspects were found. Police say 8 Filipinos were having a barbecue in the flat last night. The first noise complaint was filed at 8 p.m. 2 officers arrived at the site at 10:40 p.m. after receiving another noise complaint. There, a Filipino man who opened the door grabbed the officer's neck, pushed him downstairs and struck him. He ignored police warnings, and that's when an officer responded with 3 gunshots. The man who was shot, as well as 2 injured officers, were taken to the hospital via a helicopter. Ao Ki, acting superintendent of the Police Marine Regional Headquarters, said the Filipino man was 1.8 meters tall, calling his behavior vicious. He added the officer could smell alcohol all over the 43-year-old man, and there were empty bottles of vodka and beer all over the place. The superintendent added there were bruises on the officer's neck, adding his life was under threat at the time, thus his use of arms was necessary. The officer's concerned has been a member of the force for over 35 years and had never opened fire before. 3 residents living inside the flat were reluctant to comment.
Sorry guys, can you please leave there alone? That's because we stress and need rest.
Some residents said a group of Filipinos were drunk and making a noise last night, which prompted complaints that they were being too loud. The site where the police opened fire is just around the corner from the police post and a 5-minute walk from the Chao Pier. The incident last night was a rare example of violence in Chao because the island has the lowest crime rate in the city. It has also long been a favorite place to live for expats as well as locals. Home to 6,000 people, the population of Chao is only 30% of that of Chao. Residents and tourists mainly rely on ferries to travel. But a real estate agent said many pilots stopped renting houses on the island after 3 years of pandemic. A rural representative urged authorities to deploy more officers to station the island. The city reported 2,295 new COVID infections, up from yesterday's tally of just under 2,000. 30 of today's infections were imported. 27 more coronavirus patients succumbed to the virus. 13,017 people in total have now passed away from COVID during the 5th wave of the pandemic. The Center for Health Protection reiterated the need for people to maintain personal hygiene and comply with relevant mask requirements. In other news, rescuers searching waters between South Korea and Japan have picked up 14 of 22 crew from a cargo ship that sank early Wednesday. 9 of those rescued remain unconscious. No deaths have been confirmed so far. The Hong Kong-registered vessel Jinping, carrying lumber, sank after it sent a distress call last night. It was roughly 160 kilometers southwest of Nagasaki in Japan and 150 kilometers off South Korea's Jeju Island. The crew were believed to be Chinese and Myanmar nationals. The ship had left Malaysia's Port Klang on December the 3rd and was heading for Incheon in South Korea. The vessel is owned by a Hong Kong company, Longbright Shipping, a subsidiary of a mainland shipping firm. Overseas, Germany will supply Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, it announced Wednesday, after coming under pressure for weeks to assist Ukraine more. This as the U.S. is poised to send M1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine in its war with Russia, according to reports. Russia has reacted by calling the development another blatant provocation. Matthew Bray reports.
Washington said Tuesday that details about sending Abrams tanks to Ukraine are still being worked out, but they would be bought under the forthcoming Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative package. The announcement is likely to come with one by Germany that it will approve Poland's request to send German-made Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. By agreeing to send Abrams at an unspecified time, the White House is able to meet German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's demand for an American commitment without having to send the tanks now.
We're not going to get ahead of any potential announcement from other allies, other partners. We're not going to preview anything else we may have to say, but needless to say, this is an ongoing conversation, and it is a conversation that allows us to be responsive to the needs of our Ukrainian partners.
In Kyiv, the news of possible tank reinforcements was welcomed, even though they see it as well short of the numbers they want. Ukraine leader Volodymyr Zelensky said the need is greater than for 10 to 15 tanks. They want them for more mobility and protection ahead of a new Russian offensive that Kyiv expects in the near future. Both Germany and the United States have been wary of providing heavy armor, fearing the Kremlin could widen the conflict. Leopards are seen as a good option for Ukraine as they are available in large numbers and are easier to maintain. The Abrams is considered more problematic due to fuel consumption and maintenance needs. Meanwhile, 2 British voluntary aid workers, Chris Parry and Andrew Bagshaw, have been confirmed killed in eastern Ukraine while attempting to rescue an elderly woman from the town of Soledar. They were reported missing on January the 7th. Their car was hit by an artillery shell, according to the parents of Bagshaw. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
In the U.S., the scandals surrounding confidential documents retained by former top officials continue to expand. Documents marked as classified were discovered at former Vice President Mike Pence's Indiana home last week. The discovery puts Pence in the company of his former boss, former President Donald Trump, and President Joe Biden after documents with classified markings were found at their residences. This report from NBC News.
Tonight, the controversy over classified material now spreading again, with former Vice President Mike Pence's legal team revealing a small number of classified documents were inadvertently taken to Pence's Indiana home after he left the vice presidency, according to a letter his legal team sent to the National Archives and obtained by NBC News. They say the former VP asked his team to conduct a search and was unaware he had the secret material in his home. It was discovered January 16th. By January 18th, the letter was sent to the National Archives. The next day, the FBI took possession of the documents. Pence's team says he is cooperating fully. It comes after he was asked last year if he took classified documents after leaving the vice presidency.
I did not.
Tonight, there's bipartisan criticism that a sitting president, a former president, and now a former vice president have all acknowledged having classified material in unsecured locations.
Well, we have an epidemic of senior leaders taking classified home, and we have to say categorically, whether it's Republican or Democrat, it's all wrong.
Kind of thought, holy heck. And I do wonder, how many other foreigners.
Meanwhile, the firestorm over President Biden's handling of classified material is growing, with the possibility the FBI may search his beach house. Just this weekend, the FBI searching Mr. Biden's Wilmington, Delaware home, finding yet another batch of classified documents, the 4th discovery so far, including classified material dating back to his time in the Senate. That new discovery after a defiant Mr. Biden had insisted there was no there.
I have no regrets. I'm following what the lawyers have told me they want me to do. It's exactly what we're doing. There's no there.
Tonight, the president yet again ignoring reporters' questions as he met with top congressional Democrats, with the special counsel investigation threatening to overshadow his agenda.
President Xi Jinping delivered a video address at the summit of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States being held in Buenos Aires in Argentina. Via video link, Xi Jinping said China is ready to join hands with countries in Latin America and the Caribbean to promote world peace and development. Xi stressed that the world is in a new period of turbulence and transformation. He said countries can only tackle the challenges and tide over this trying time through greater solidarity and closer cooperation. Argentina's President Alberto Fernandez, the rotating president of the group, said China is an important trading partner of countries in the region, and they look forward to deepening trade and economic relations with Beijing. Still ahead on tonight's news. Tourists to Japan brave the harsh weather to return home. New Zealand's new leader wants to focus on improving the economy. And a look at the extracurricular activities that we grew up with. Welcome back to TVB News. Some Hong Kong tourists were stranded at Kansai International Airport in Osaka, Japan, due to an ongoing severe winter storm in the country. Many domestic flights were postponed or cancelled, but the blizzard did not stop flights operating between Hong Kong and Japan. Mimo Sangai with more.
This afternoon, a flight arriving from Kansai Airport to Hong Kong was delayed for an hour. This man has spent 7 days with his family on a package tour in Osaka and was glad to be back home despite the heavy weather in Japan.
When the snow came last night, it did create a little bit of hiccups for us to arrive to the airport, but before last night, it's just like any normal time, so I was fortunate to not having any hiccups during my trip with the tour guide.
Learn added that his family was not worried about their safety because they had a good tour guide.
Luckily, we have a tour guide, a very nice tour guide right there, and he managed to take us through the JR Metro. So finally, when we arrived at the airport and we see there's not a long queue, then we know we should be safe.
Meanwhile, the weather had affected flights flying from Tokyo to Hong Kong.
Our plane was delayed. It was delayed for like an hour, so I couldn't catch my flight to Hong Kong on time.
As challenging weather conditions such as heavy snowfall and strong wind are expected to hold through Thursday, flight cancellations are possible. Tourists should maintain vigilant and be extra careful when traveling. Mimosa Nai, TVB News.
It's the last day of the 4-day Lunar New Year holiday. Many Hong Kongers returned from the mainland today via the high-speed rail. The Hong Kong section of the high-speed rail were bustling with crowds. Some new arrivals in Hong Kong said the immigration clearance process was smooth. Cross-border travelers include mainland tourists who hope to make the most out of their week-long Spring Festival, touring around Hong Kong. This traveller said the requirement to conduct PCR tests before taking the high-speed rail is troublesome, and she hopes the government could do away with the mandate soon. Some 400,000 Hong Kong residents departed the SAR between last Saturday and Tuesday. The government reminded the public that all prepaid SIM cards must be real name registered before February 23rd. The Communications Authority said the government has set up kiosks at 25 MTR stations and 18 designated post offices for residents seeking help with the registration process for their prepaid SIM cards. Esmond Chiu, Assistant Director of the Office of the Communications Authority, said the authorities will hold more talks with non-profit organizations to walk the public through the registration process, especially for the elderly. The 2023-24 budget is set to be delivered on the 22nd of next month. Lawmakers from the DAB party suggest authorities to issue e-vouchers again to help boost the economy. The public consultation for the new budget is underway. Today, a dozen lawmakers gathered outside the government headquarters to express their hopes for the upcoming budget. They are asking the government to issue e-vouchers worth no less than $5,000 and more subsidies for electricity fares. Meanwhile, Lo Wai Kwok, the chairman of the Business and Professionals Alliance for Hong Kong, put on the costume of the god of wealth to parade in Mongkok anti-Po, hoping the budget would help the city return to normalcy. Elsewhere, Chris Hipkins was sworn in today as New Zealand's 41st Prime Minister following the unexpected resignation of Jacinda Ardern. Hipkins has promised a back-to-basics approach focusing on the economy. Daniel Rao tells us more.
New Zealand Governor-General Cindy Kiro officiated the brief swearing-in ceremony of the country's new Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, after she earlier accepted outgoing leader Jacinda Ardern's resignation. Ardern said she was resigning last week after more than 5 years in the role because she no longer had enough in the tank to do the job justice. Carmel Sepuloni was also sworn in as Deputy Prime Minister, the first time a person with Pacific Island heritage has taken on the role. During the ceremony, Hipkins called his appointment as Prime Minister a privilege and vowed to do his best to tackle the issues facing the country.
This is the biggest privilege and responsibility of my life. I'm energised and excited by the challenges that lie ahead. The Deputy Prime Minister and I both take today's appointments very seriously. As Prime Minister, I acknowledge the important nature of my role in advising the Sovereign and the Governor-General.
Hipkins served as Education and Police Minister under Ardern and rose to public prominence during the COVID pandemic when he took on a kind of crisis management role. Ardern plans to stay on as a backbench lawmaker until April to avoid triggering a special election ahead of New Zealand's general election in October. Opinion polls are indicating that Chris Hipkins' Labour Party is trailing its Conservative opposition. Following his first cabinet meeting as Prime Minister today, Hipkins outlined that controlling inflation would be one of the Labour government's main priorities.
Here in New Zealand, household budgets are being stretched, and we do need to do as much as we possibly can to help with that. We've already taken active steps to address the underlying causes of high prices, including at the petrol pump and at the supermarket, and the government is doing its bit to bring spending down to more normal levels so that we don't add to those inflationary pressures.
Dunnerell, TVB News.
Anti-government protesters have clashed with police in the Peruvian capital near to the Congress 6 days after the Takeover Lima march took place. Trouble erupted after a group of protesters stormed a street blocked by fences and a wall of riot police. Tear gas was fired and running battles ensued. Unrest has been rampant in the Andean nation since the removal of office of former President Pedro Castillo in December. He attempted to dissolve the legislature to prevent an impeachment vote. The current president, Dina Boluart, blamed the latest violence on radical groups. Back locally, extracurricular activities are an important part of childhood and growing up for millions of Hong Kongers. The Education University of Hong Kong curated an exhibition showcasing the history and evolution of students' extracurricular activities over the past 100 years. Jacqueline with more.
Board games, jungle chess, and this watermelon football. These items hark back to popular after-school activities in Hong Kong between the 70s and 90s. Taking us back to these nostalgic times is this exhibition held at the Hong Kong Museum of Education by the Education University of Hong Kong. Among some 200 exhibits on display is this photo featuring actor and performing arts educator Chung King-fai when he was a secondary school student back in 1954 and won a prize in an inter-school drama competition. These baseballs were autographed by members of the Shotton Martins, a youth baseball team that turned struggling pupils into fine athletes. Their story inspired a 2016 Hong Kong movie, Weeds on Fire. Another interesting exhibit showed former LegCo president Rita Fan clinching the top prize at the Hong Kong Schools Music Festival in her younger days. Sidney Chang, the librarian of the Education University, said the evolution of Hong Kong's extracurricular activities goes hand in hand with the city's historical development. Chang said these ECAs began as simple activities back in the early 20th century before the government put more emphasis on developing them during the post-war period after 1949 amid the city's population boom. Chang said social movements during the late 60s encouraged the government to organize more diverse after-school activities, providing a safe outlet for young people to let off steam while helping students explore their diverse abilities and interests. Meanwhile, Vice President of the Education University, John Lee, said he hopes the exhibition helps the public reflect on the meaning of extracurricular activities and learning, especially on how to learn in a joyful way. Jacqueline, TVB News.
And that's the news. Thanks for watching.